I think my marriage might not be what I thought it was. I don't know if I'm losing my mind. I never thought I'd be posting here. Honestly, whenever I used to read stories on relationship subs, I always assumed there were warning signs people ignored. I would sit there thinking, how do you not see it? Or how can someone lie for that long? Now I'm the one staring at my phone at 2:17 a.m. unable to sleep, wondering if I'm becoming paranoid. For context, I'm 37. My wife, Sarah, is 35. We've been married for 9 years and together for almost 13. Up until recently, I would have described our marriage as stable. Not perfect, but solid. We weren't one of those couples constantly posting romantic photos online or making grand gestures. We had a routine. We had inside jokes. We argued about stupid things like whose turn it was to buy groceries or whether the thermostat was too high. Normal married people stuff. At least that's what I thought. One of the biggest constants in our lives has always been my best friend, Ryan. I've known Ryan since we were 12 years old. We played football together, got into trouble together, went through awkward teenage years together. He was the best man at my wedding. When my father died 6 years ago, Ryan was the first person at my door. When Sarah had surgery a few years back, Ryan took time off work to help drive her to appointments when I couldn't leave the office. He wasn't just a friend, he was family. Everyone called him Uncle Ryan around our nieces and nephews. He came to holiday dinners, birthdays, barbecues, weekend trips. There were entire years where I probably saw Ryan more than some of my actual relatives. Sarah always got along with him too. That never seemed strange. In fact, I was grateful. A lot of spouses don't connect with their partner's friends. Sarah genuinely liked him. The three of us could sit around drinking wine on a patio and laugh for hours. If someone had asked me 6 months ago who I trusted most in the world, the answer would have been easy. So, Ryan. No hesitation, no doubts, nothing. Which is why what happened recently has me questioning everything. The weird thing is that I can't point to some dramatic event that started all this. There wasn't a suspicious text message. There wasn't lipstick on a collar. There wasn't some obvious movie scene where everything suddenly clicked. It was smaller than that. Much smaller. A feeling. You know how sometimes you walk into a room and immediately sense tension? Nobody says anything. Nobody does anything. But somehow you know a conversation stopped when you entered. That's the closest thing I can compare it to. A few months ago, I came home early from work. Sarah and Ryan were sitting in our kitchen. Nothing unusual there. Ryan stopped by all the time. But when I walked in, both of them suddenly got quiet. Not completely silent, just different, like I had interrupted something. Sarah immediately stood up and asked how my day was. Ryan started talking about a football game. Everything seemed normal, yet for some reason I couldn't shake the feeling. I remember actually laughing at myself later. I told myself I was being ridiculous. They're friends. Of course they're comfortable talking when I'm not around. What exactly was I accusing them of? Nothing. I wasn't accusing anyone of anything. Still, that tiny feeling never completely went away. And over the following weeks, little moments started piling up. Moments that didn't make sense individually. Moments I kept explaining away. Moments that would eventually lead me somewhere I never imagined possible. But the first time I truly felt something was wrong wasn't in my house. It happened at a friend's birthday party. And looking back now, I wish I had trusted my instincts that night. I spent the next couple of weeks convincing myself I was imagining things. Seriously, every time that strange feeling surfaced, I'd immediately shut it down. Sarah had never given me a reason not to trust her. Ryan had been my best friend for 25 years. People don't spend decades proving their loyalty only to suddenly become villains. At least that's what I kept telling myself. The birthday party happened about 3 months ago. One of our mutual friends was turning 40, so there was a big gathering at a rented event space. Around 40 people showed up, a mix of family, coworkers, and old friends. The kind of event where everyone drifts into little groups throughout the night. Nothing unusual. Sarah and I arrived together. Ryan got there later. Everything seemed normal. For the first hour or so, I barely noticed either of them. I was catching up with people I hadn't seen in months. Then something happened that stuck with me. Not because it was dramatic, because it was subtle. I was standing near the bar talking to a couple of friends when I looked across the room and saw Sarah laughing at something on her phone. Ryan was standing beside her. Both of them were staring at the same screen. The second Sarah noticed me looking, she locked her phone and slipped it into her purse. Ryan immediately looked away. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 seconds. I remember thinking it was weird. Then I immediately felt guilty for thinking it was weird. Maybe they were looking at photos. Maybe someone had sent a funny video. Maybe literally anything else. Still, that feeling returned. That tiny itch in the back of my brain. The rest of the evening, I started noticing things I normally wouldn't. Whenever Sarah disappeared, Ryan wasn't far away. Whenever Ryan got up from a table, Sarah seemed to drift in the same direction sooner or later. Not together, never obviously, just enough to make me notice. The strange part was how careful it all seemed, like two people who understood exactly how much attention they could draw before it looked suspicious. Again, I hated myself for even thinking that. Around midnight, a group of us moved outside near a fire pit. At one point, Sarah excused herself to use the restroom. A few minutes later, Ryan vanished too. I didn't think much of it until nearly 20 minutes passed. When they eventually returned, they arrived from completely different directions. Sarah came through the main entrance. Ryan walked around from the parking lot. I remember joking about it. Did you guys get lost? Sarah laughed. Ryan laughed. Nobody looked nervous. Nobody stumbled over their words. If anything, they seemed almost too relaxed. Later that night, driving home, I casually mentioned it. Funny coincidence. You and Ryan disappeared at the same time. The reaction caught me off guard. Sarah immediately became defensive. Not angry. Defensive. Why are you keeping track of where people go? I laughed. I wasn't. You literally just brought it up. The conversation ended there, but the tone stayed with me, because it felt disproportionate. I wasn't accusing her of anything. I had made a joke, yet somehow she responded like she'd been challenged. The next morning I told myself to let it go. Everybody gets defensive sometimes. Everybody has bad days. Everybody says things they don't mean. The problem was that incidents like that kept happening. Small enough to dismiss, frequent enough to remember, and then another thing changed. A change so minor most husbands probably wouldn't have noticed it. But once I did, I couldn't stop seeing it. Sarah and Ryan started texting each other. A lot. Far more than they ever had before. And when I finally paid attention to how often it was happening, I realized I had absolutely no idea what they could possibly have that much to talk about. If someone had asked me back then how often Sarah and Ryan texted each other, I probably would have said, I don't know. Occasionally. That's what I believed. The reality was very different. Once I started paying attention, I realized their communication wasn't occasional at all. It was constant. Not every minute. Not enough to be obvious, but enough that I kept noticing it. A notification would appear while we were watching TV. Sarah would glance down, smile slightly, then lock her phone. Another message would come through during dinner. Another while we were in bed. Another while we were driving somewhere together. Every single time, she would respond almost immediately. I remember telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe Ryan was going through something. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe I was becoming one of those jealous husbands who sees problems where none exist. The last thing I wanted was to become paranoid. So I ignored it. Or at least I tried to. The problem was that my brain had started connecting dots. And once that process starts, it's difficult to stop. One evening we were sitting on the couch watching a movie. Sarah was texting. Adeb. I glanced over casually. Not trying to spy, just looking. The second she noticed me glance at her screen, she tilted the phone away. It happened instantly, like a reflex. I pretended not to notice, but my stomach tightened. Because people don't usually hide harmless conversations from their spouses, at least not like that. A few days later, Ryan came over for dinner. The three of us sat around the table talking like we always had. Everything seemed normal. Then I got up to grab another drink from the kitchen. When I returned, the conversation stopped. Completely. Both of them looked at me. For a split second, nobody spoke. Then Ryan launched into his story about work. The transition felt forced, like someone had switched topics in the middle of a sentence. Nothing concrete, nothing provable, just another tiny moment, another grain of sand added to a growing pile. What made everything worse was the war happening inside my own head. Half of me felt suspicious. The other half hated myself for feeling suspicious. Ryan wasn't some random guy. This was my best friend, a man I trusted with my house keys, a man who had helped carry my father's coffin, a man who knew every major event of my adult life. And Sarah, she was my wife, the woman I'd built my entire future around, the woman I still loved, the woman I genuinely believed loved me. So every time doubt appeared, I attacked it. You're overthinking. You're insecure. You're imagining things. I became my own defense attorney, constantly arguing against my instincts. Then something else started happening. Sarah became distant, not dramatically, subtly. She still said I love you. She still kissed me goodbye in the morning, but something felt different. The warmth wasn't gone, just reduced, like someone had slowly lowered the volume on our relationship. She seemed distracted more often, less interested in conversations, less interested in spending time together, less interested in intimacy. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, she'd blame stress. Work, Kate, life. All reasonable explanations. All believable. Yet somehow none of them fully fit. Meanwhile, her energy around Ryan seemed unchanged. Maybe even stronger. They still laughed easily together. Still exchanged inside jokes. Still seemed perfectly comfortable. One night, after Sarah had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the living room replaying months of interactions in my head. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask the question I had been avoiding. What if I'm not imagining this? The thought terrified me, not because I believed it, because I realized I was starting to. And then something happened that made the situation impossible to ignore. A single notification, a single name on a phone screen, a message I wasn't supposed to see. And once I saw it, I could never unsee it. I wish I could tell you the message itself was some dramatic smoking gun. Something obvious. Something undeniable. It wasn't. That's what made it so frustrating. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Sarah was in the shower. I was sitting at the kitchen table paying bills and answering a few work emails. Her phone was charging on the counter nearby. Normally, I never touched her phone. Not because it was off limits. We both knew each other's passcodes. There had never been any secrecy between us. At least not that I knew of. Then the screen lit up. A notification appeared. Ryan. Just seeing his name made my stomach tighten. Not because friends can't text. Not because it proved anything. But because of everything that had been building for weeks. The message preview only showed part of the text. Don't worry. He didn't notice. That was it. That's all I saw before the notification disappeared. 7 words. 7 stupid words. Yet I felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over my head. I stared at the phone. My heart started pounding. Immediately, I began searching for innocent explanations. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe they were talking about a gift. Maybe they were discussing something private that had nothing to do with me. But one question kept repeating in my mind. What exactly didn't I notice? The moment Sarah came downstairs, I acted normal. Or at least I tried to. Inside, my brain was racing. I kept replaying those words. Over and over. Don't worry. He didn't notice. That night I barely slept. By morning I had almost convinced myself to let it go. Then another incident happened. And another. And another. Within a few days I started noticing a pattern. Whenever Ryan texted, Sarah became hyper-aware of her phone. If she left it unattended, she'd come back for it almost immediately. She started carrying it from room to room, even to places she'd never taken it before. The bathroom, the laundry room, the backyard, everywhere. One evening, I finally asked a simple question. What have you and Ryan been talking about so much lately? The reaction was immediate and strange. Sarah looked annoyed, not confused, not curious. And what? I was just asking. You make it sound like we're doing something wrong. The statement hit me harder than it should have, because I hadn't said anything remotely close to that. I had asked a normal question, yet somehow she responded to an accusation I hadn't made. The same pattern. Defensiveness where none should exist. I backed off. The conversation ended, but my doubts didn't. They grew. For the next week, I paid closer attention. Nothing obsessive, nothing invasive, just observation. And what I observed bothered me a lot. Sarah and Ryan rarely texted when I was actively engaged with them. Instead, messages tended to appear when one of them wasn't physically present, almost like they preferred private communication even when open communication would have been easier. Then came the first timeline inconsistency, a small one, the kind most people would forget. Ryan mentioned grabbing coffee near his office on Thursday afternoon. A few hours later, Sarah casually mentioned spending that same afternoon shopping across town. Neither statement seemed important at first. Then I remembered something. I had called Sarah that afternoon. She hadn't answered. When she eventually called back, she said she was driving and couldn't talk. At the time, I hadn't thought twice about it. Now I found myself wondering, why couldn't she talk? Why did both stories suddenly feel incomplete? For the first time, I started writing things down. Dates, comments, times, nothing dramatic, just notes. Part of me felt ridiculous. The other part felt increasingly certain that something wasn't right. Then someone unexpected entered the picture, someone who would completely change the direction of this situation. Because a week later, my younger sister Megan called me, and after a few minutes of awkward small talk, she asked a question that made my blood run cold. Hey, this is probably nothing, but why was Sarah having lunch with Ryan yesterday? For a few seconds after Megan asked that question, I genuinely couldn't respond. I just sat there holding my phone, staring at the wall, trying to process what she'd said. Yesterday? I finally asked. My stomach dropped. Because yesterday Sarah had told me she was spending the afternoon with a coworker named Jenna. Not Ryan. Definitely not Ryan. Megan immediately noticed the change in my voice. Wait, she didn't tell you? I forced a laugh. No, she probably just forgot to mention it. The words sounded fake even to me. There was a brief silence. Then Megan carefully said, maybe. The way she said it told me everything. She didn't believe that explanation either. I asked her where she'd seen them. She told me she'd been meeting a client at a restaurant downtown. As she walked in, she noticed Sarah and Ryan seated together near the back. Just the two of them, eating lunch, talking, loving. According to Megan, they looked comfortable, very comfortable, not romantic, not openly affectionate, just close. The kind of close you notice, the kind of close that sticks in your memory, especially when it's your brother's wife sitting across from his best friend. After we hung up, I spent the next hour staring at my phone. My mind kept bouncing between explanations. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe Ryan needed advice. Maybe Sarah didn't mention it because it wasn't important. People forget details all the time. But another voice kept asking a simple question. If it was innocent, why hide it? That evening I casually brought it up. I tried to sound relaxed, nonchalant, almost bored. Funny thing, Megan apparently saw you and Ryan having lunch yesterday. The reaction came instantly, a fraction of a second. Oh, I caught. Shocked. Real shock. Before she quickly recovered. Oh, just one word. Oh, then she laughed. Yeah, we grabbed lunch. I waited. She said nothing else. No explanation. No context. Nothing. Eventually I asked, I thought you were with Jenna. Another pause. Tiny. But there. Plans changed. Why didn't you mention it? The answer arrived too quickly. I didn't think it mattered. I nodded. Pretended to accept it. Inside, alarm bells were ringing. Because that's not how Sarah normally behaved. She told me everything. Not because I demanded it. Because that's what married couples do. If she met a friend for coffee, I'd hear about it. If she ran into an old classmate, I'd hear about it. If she bought a different brand of cereal, I'd probably hear about it. Yet somehow a private lunch with my best friend never came up. The explanation didn't fit. The next few days were rough. I couldn't stop thinking, couldn't stop analyzing, couldn't stop noticing things. Every interaction between them suddenly seemed different. Every glance, every joke, every conversation. I found myself studying them the way a detective studies surveillance footage. And I hated it. I hated what I was becoming. I hated the suspicion. I hated the paranoia. Most of all, I hated the possibility that my instincts might actually be right. Then Megan called again. This time her voice sounded nervous. Listen, she said, I wasn't going to tell you this. My chest tightened. What? I've seen them together before. I felt my pulse spike. What do you mean before? There was a long silence. Then she said something that changed everything. 3 times, actually. The room suddenly felt smaller. My heart was hammering. 3 times? According to Megan, she'd noticed Sarah and Ryan together on separate occasions over the past several months. Always alone. Always somewhere neither of them had mentioned afterward. Coffee shops, lunch spots, a bookstore downtown. Nothing inappropriate, nothing definitive, but enough that she'd remembered it. Enough that she eventually found it strange. Enough that she was finally telling me. And for the first time since all of this started, I realized something terrifying. The inconsistencies weren't living only inside my head anymore. Someone else was seeing them too. And that meant I could no longer dismiss everything as paranoia. But the most disturbing discovery was still waiting for me. Because 3 nights later, I accidentally saw something on Sarah's phone that proved one thing beyond any doubt. They weren't just talking. They were actively hiding their conversations from me. After Megan's call, something shifted inside me. Not completely. I still wasn't ready to believe the worst. But for the first time, I stopped automatically defending them. Every strange interaction no longer received an immediate excuse. Instead, I started asking questions. Questions neither Sarah nor Ryan seemed eager to answer. The problem was that I still had nothing concrete. Nothing I could point to and say, there, that's proof. Just a growing collection of inconsistencies. Hidden lunches, defensive reactions, unexplained communication, coincidences that no longer felt coincidental. Then came the night everything changed. It was a Thursday. Sarah had fallen asleep on the couch while watching TV. Her phone was beside her. The screen suddenly lit up. I wasn't trying to snoop. I wasn't reaching for it. I simply looked up at the exact wrong or right moment. A notification appeared, not from Ryan. That was the first thing that caught my attention. The sender's name was unfamiliar. Just a woman's first name. Someone I'd never heard of. But the preview message made no sense. Delete our chat after reading. The notification disappeared almost immediately. My stomach turned. I sat frozen, trying to process what I'd just seen. Delete our chat? Who talks like that? Why would anyone send that message? For nearly 10 minutes I argued with myself. Leave it alone. Trust your wife. Stop acting crazy. but another voice kept repeating the same thing. Something is wrong. Eventually, I picked up the phone. My hands were literally shaking. I knew Sarah's passcode. She knew mine. That had never been an issue. I unlocked the screen. The contact wasn't there. No message thread. Nothing. At first I thought I'd imagined it. Then I checked recently deleted conversations. My heart nearly stopped. There were dozens. Not one or two. Dozens. Entire conversations erased. Some from random contacts. Some from numbers that weren't saved. And one from Ryan. I stared at the screen. My breathing became shallow. The conversation itself was gone. Only the deletion record remained. Enough to prove messages had existed. Enough to prove they'd been intentionally removed. I felt physically sick. Still, I wasn't ready to conclude they were having an affair. Maybe there was another explanation. Maybe there was some surprise being planned. Maybe Ryan was helping with something personal. Maybe. Every excuse sounded weaker than the last. The next morning I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront anyone yet. Not until I knew the truth. If I accused them without evidence, they'd deny everything. And if something really was happening, I'd lose whatever chance I had of discovering it. So I stayed quiet. I watched. I listened. I paid attention. Over the following week, patterns emerged. Sarah's phone activity increased dramatically whenever Ryan wasn't physically present. When Ryan visited, both of them seemed unusually careful, almost disciplined. No private texting. No suspicious behavior. Nothing obvious. Looking back now, I think they knew enough not to be careless around each other. What they didn't know was that I had started paying attention to timing. And timing told a story. Whenever Sarah said she was running errands, Ryan often became unavailable around the same period. Whenever Ryan claimed he was busy with work, Sarah suddenly took longer than expected to return home. Individually, none of it proved anything. Together, it formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. Then Megan helped again, completely by accident. She sent me a screenshot. At first glance it looked harmless. A social media photo from a local cafe. A random picture uploaded by someone she followed. But when I zoomed in, my entire body went cold. Sitting in the far corner of the cafe were two people, partially obscured, not facing the camera, yet unmistakable. Sarah and Ryan. The timestamp showed the photo had been taken on a day when both of them had told completely different stories about where they were. For the first time, I had proof of a lie. Not proof of an affair, but proof that they were coordinating false explanations. And once that realization hit me, another horrifying possibility emerged. If they were willing to lie about being together, how many other lies had they already told me? The answer arrived sooner than I expected. Because 2 days later, while following a trail of deleted messages and hidden accounts, I discovered something neither of them had intended me to find. A second phone number, one that connected both of them. And what was attached to that number would destroy the last remaining piece of trust I still had. I don't think there's a moment in life that truly prepares you for discovering that the people you trust most have been lying to you. Movies get it wrong. People imagine explosive emotions, instant rage, immediate confrontation, some dramatic scene where everything suddenly becomes clear. That wasn't my experience. When the truth finally started revealing itself, I mostly felt numb, like my brain was refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. The second phone number appeared by accident. I wasn't hacking anything. I wasn't using spyware. I was simply following loose threads, looking for explanations, looking for reasons, looking for literally anything that could prove I was wrong. Instead, I found something much worse. The number was linked to a messaging account, one neither Sarah nor Ryan had ever mentioned. A private account, minimal activity, almost no profile information. The kind of account created specifically to avoid attention. At first I couldn't even prove it belonged to either of them. Then I found the connection. A recovery email, then another. A small trail that eventually linked back to Ryan. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I kept hoping the next discovery would explain everything. That there would be some innocent reason, some misunderstanding, something, anything. Instead, every piece led to another, and another, and another, until eventually the picture became impossible to ignore. The account wasn't used often, but when it was used, it communicated with another private account, one connected to Sarah. I remember staring at the screen for several minutes, unable to move, unable to think, unable to breathe normally, because suddenly every coincidence from the past several months looked different. Every hidden lunch, every deleted conversation, every defensive reaction, every unexplained absence. They weren't isolated incidents. They were pieces of the same puzzle. Still, I needed certainty. I needed something undeniable, something neither of them could explain away. Then I found it. The message history itself was limited. Most conversations had clearly been deleted, but not everything. One exchange remained, probably because they assumed nobody would ever find it. The conversation wasn't long, only a handful of messages, yet it completely destroyed my world. One message from Sarah read, "He still has no idea." Ryan responded, "After all this time, he's never questioned us. After all this time." I must have reread those words 50 times. After all this time, not weeks, not months, time long enough to become routine, long enough to sound established, long enough to imply history. I felt sick, physically sick. I actually ran to the bathroom and threw up, not because of the affair itself, not yet, because of what those messages revealed. They weren't worried about getting caught. They were discussing me, mocking my trust, treating my loyalty as protection. For years I had defended both of them, trusted both of them, loved both of them, and apparently they knew exactly how much trust they were abusing. Then I found the message that removed all remaining doubt. A photograph, nothing explicit, nothing sexual, just the two of them, together, in a hotel room, standing close, far too close, Ryan's arm around her waist, Sarah looking directly into the camera, smiling, comfortable, excellent, like two people who belonged together. The image metadata showed it had been taken 14 months earlier. 14 months. I remember staring at that number. 14 months. At minimum, maybe longer. My entire perception of reality started collapsing. Birthdays, vacations, family gatherings, holiday dinners. Every memory suddenly felt contaminated. How long had they been lying? How many times had I sat across from them while they secretly shared this life? How many conversations were fake? How many smiles? How many reassurances? The romantic betrayal was devastating, but the friendship betrayal cut just as deep, maybe deeper, because Ryan hadn't simply betrayed me. He had participated in the deception, repeatedly, deliberately, over a long period of time. Together they had built an entire system of lies around me, and the more evidence I uncovered, the clearer that became. By 3 in the morning, I had enough proof to end any argument, enough proof to destroy every denial, enough proof to end my marriage. But before I confronted them, I needed one thing. I needed to understand exactly how deep the deception went, and the next piece of evidence would reveal something even worse than the affair itself. It would reveal that they had been coordinating their lies together for far longer than I imagined. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I sat alone in the dark living room while Sarah slept upstairs, completely unaware that her entire secret life had just collapsed. Every few minutes I'd look at the clock. Midnight, 1:12 a.m., 2:47 a.m., 4:03 a.m. Time seemed meaningless. My mind kept cycling through the same emotions. God, disbelief, ready, grief, then back to shock again. I must have looked through the evidence 100 times. The messages, the accounts, the photo, the timelines. I wasn't trying to find more proof. I was trying to find a mistake, some flaw in my conclusion, something that would allow reality to return to normal. I never found it. As dawn approached, I started replaying years of memories. And that's when the real damage began. The evidence proved they had betrayed me, but my own memories started showing me how many opportunities they'd had to do it. Ryan helping Sarah move furniture while I worked late. Weekend errands, coffee meetups, group vacations, birthday parties, holiday gatherings. Thousands of moments. Thousands. Any one of them could now contain a lie. The worst part was realizing I no longer knew which memories were real. I kept remembering things I'd once considered signs of friendship. Now, they looked completely different. Ryan showing up unexpectedly to help Sarah with home projects. Sarah defending Ryan whenever anyone criticized him. The private jokes. The comfortable familiarity. The way they always seemed to understand each other immediately. For years, I'd seen those things as proof of trust. Now they felt like evidence. Around 7 in the morning, Sarah came downstairs. She smiled, asked if I wanted coffee, kissed me on the cheek, acted completely normal. I genuinely thought I might throw up, because suddenly I could see it. The performance, the practice normality. She sat across from me discussing weekend plans while I knew she'd spent at least 14 months lying to my face. Maybe longer, and somehow she looked completely comfortable doing it. That realization hurt more than the affair itself. The ease of it, the effortlessness, the fact that deception had apparently become routine. For the next 2 days, I functioned on autopilot. Work became impossible. Food tasted like cardboard. Sleep didn't exist. I barely recognized myself. The only person I spoke honestly to was Megan. My sister immediately came over after I showed her everything. I don't think I'll ever forget her reaction. Not because she was dramatic. Because she wasn't. She just sat there quietly reading the messages. Then she looked at me and started crying. That broke me. For some reason, seeing someone else hurt on my behalf made everything feel real. I cried harder that afternoon than I had since my father's funeral. Megan stayed for hours. She listened. She let me vent. She reminded me I wasn't crazy. Most importantly, she helped stop me from doing something stupid, because by then I wanted answers immediately. I wanted confrontation. I wanted them cornered. I wanted the lies to stop. But Megan convinced me to slow down. Make sure you have everything first. She was right. The following day we organized the evidence. Screenshots, photos, dates, messages, timeline comparisons, deleted chat records, the cafe photo, everything. As we worked, another horrifying detail emerged. The lies weren't random. They were coordinated, repeatedly coordinated. The same explanations appeared in both their stories. The same excuses, the same timeline adjustments, the same carefully crafted narratives. This wasn't two people occasionally covering for each other. This was a system, a long-term system, one built specifically to keep me in the dark. By the time we finished organizing everything, I realized something. I no longer wanted more evidence. I no longer needed more answers. I already knew enough. The marriage I thought I had was over. The friendship I thought I had was over. All that remained was the confrontation, and I knew exactly who I was going to confront first. Tawa. Because the next evening, after 9 years of marriage, I was finally going to place every piece of evidence on the table and ask her a question she could no longer avoid. How long have you been lying to me? The confrontation happened on a Sunday evening. I remember that detail because the entire day felt surreal. Sarah spent the afternoon doing normal things. Laundry, groceries, watching television. At one point she even asked if I wanted to order takeout. Meanwhile, I sat there knowing that in a few hours our entire life together would be destroyed. Strangely, by then I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was exhausted. The rage had burned itself out temporarily and left behind something colder, something quieter. I waited until after dinner. Then I asked her to sit down. Immediately she looked concerned. What's wrong? I didn't answer. Instead, I placed my phone on the coffee table, then a folder, then several printed screenshots. I watched the color drain from her face. That was the moment she knew. Not what I knew, but that I knew something. What is this? She asked. Her voice sounded shaky. I looked directly at her. How long have you been sleeping with Ryan? The room went completely silent. For a second, I thought she might tell the truth. Instead, she laughed. Actually laughed. A short, nervous laugh. What? How long? Her eyes moved to the papers again, then back to me. Nothing is happening with Ryan. The lie came so quickly it almost impressed me. Months of suspicion, weeks of evidence, and she still tried it. I slid the first screenshot toward her. The hidden accounts. She stared at it, then immediately shifted tactics. It's not what it looks like. I almost smiled. The oldest line in human history. It's exactly what it looks like. No, then explain it. She couldn't, at least not convincingly. Instead, she started offering fragments, partial truths, carefully selected details, the kind people use when a complete lie becomes impossible. Okay, we've talked privately. Okay, we met a few times. Okay, we hid some conversations. Every admission arrived only after evidence forced it. Never voluntarily, never honestly. Every time one excuse collapsed, another appeared. Then came the blame shifting. I had expected it. It still hurt. You've been distant. I didn't feel appreciated. We were having problems. We grew apart. Listening to her rewrite our marriage in real time was unbelievable. Apparently, the relationship she'd spent years assuring me was stable had secretly been miserable. Convenient timing. I pushed another photo across the table. The hotel picture. Her face immediately changed. That was the first moment genuine panic appeared. Not sadness. Not remorse. Panic. Because she knew she couldn't explain it away. Still, she tried. It wasn't what you're thinking. I remember laughing. A harsh, ugly laugh. The kind that comes out when reality becomes absurd. Then her phone started ringing. Ryan. Of course it was Ryan. The timing would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. She declined the call. A few seconds later he called again. Then again. Then again. Finally, I answered. Hello? Silence. Then Ryan's voice. Where's Sarah? I felt something inside me snap. Why don't you tell me where she was 14 months ago in that hotel room? Nothing. Complete silence. Then he hung up. 20 minutes later, he showed up at the house. Uninvited. Desperate. The second he walked through the door, I saw it in his face. Fear. Real fear. Not because he betrayed me. Because he'd been caught. At first he denied everything too. Then minimized it. Then reframed it. Then justified it. The story kept changing. Every few minutes a new version appeared. Meanwhile, Sarah's version kept changing too. And the two versions didn't match. Not even close. One claimed the affair started recently. The other claimed it started over a year ago. One claimed it was emotional first. The other couldn't keep the timeline straight. Watching them unravel was surreal. For years they had coordinated lies flawlessly. Now they couldn't survive 30 minutes of scrutiny. The final collapse came from something Megan had discovered earlier that day. A location history record, one neither of them knew existed. The data placed them together repeatedly over a period that stretched far beyond either version of their story. Yes, not months. Yes. When I put that evidence on the table, the room went silent. No more excuses. No more alternate explanations. No more blame shifting. Just silence. The truth finally stood there naked and undeniable. My wife had been having a long-term affair with my best friend, and both of them had spent years building a network of lies to hide it. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then Sarah started crying. Ryan stared at the floor, and I realized something unexpected. I didn't need another answer. I didn't need another confession. I didn't even need an apology, because the people sitting in front of me were no longer the people I thought I knew. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt completely done. But ending the confrontation turned out to be much easier than surviving what came after. The strange thing about discovering your entire life has been built around lies is that the actual confrontation isn't the hardest part. At least it wasn't for me. The hardest part came afterward. The silence, the empty spaces, the moments when nobody was arguing anymore and there was nothing left to uncover. Just reality, raw and unavoidable. The night Ryan left my house, I never spoke to him again. Not because I planned some dramatic ending. I simply had nothing left to say. 25 years of friendship ended with a closed front door. No final speech. No fight. No closure conversation. Just absence. As for Sarah, she stayed with her sister for a while after the confrontation. The first few days felt unreal. I'd wake up and briefly forget everything. Then reality would hit again. Every morning felt like reliving the discovery. I moved through life mechanically. Breathe. Friends and family eventually learned what happened. Not because I launched a public campaign against them. I didn't. People simply noticed. They asked questions. The truth spread naturally, and the consequences turned out to be far less dramatic than I once imagined. Nobody exploded. Nobody got publicly humiliated. Nobody's life instantly collapsed. Instead, people quietly adjusted. Relationships shifted. Trust disappeared. Invitations stopped coming. Conversations changed. The people who knew the truth made their own decisions. Most of them didn't like what they'd learned. A few months later, Sarah and I officially started divorce proceedings. By then the anger had largely faded. What remained was grief. Real grief. Because despite everything, I wasn't mourning the woman who betrayed me. I was mourning the woman I thought she was. Those are two very different losses. The same was true for Ryan. I didn't miss the man who lied to me. I missed the friend I believed existed. For a long time, that distinction was difficult to understand. Eventually it became one of the most important lessons I learned. You can't lose someone who is never actually there. You can only lose the version you believed in. Megan stayed by my side through all of it. I honestly don't know how I would have survived those first months without her. Every time I started blaming myself, she reminded me of something important. Trusting people isn't weakness. Being deceived isn't stupidity. The shame belongs to the people who chose dishonesty, not the person who believed them. It took a while for that idea to sink in. For months I kept replaying old memories, searching for missed signs, missed opportunities, moments where I should have known. Eventually, I realized that game has no ending. You can torture yourself forever looking backward, or you can start moving forward. I chose forward, slowly, imperfectly, one day at a time. I started exercising again, started reconnecting with old friends, started rebuilding routines that belonged only to me. Nothing dramatic, just small steps. Small steps eventually become distance, and distance eventually becomes healing. The last update I ever received about Sarah and Ryan came from a mutual friend nearly a year later. Apparently, they tried being together openly after everything came out. It didn't last. Not because of karma, not because of some grand punishment. Because relationships built on deception often struggle when deception is removed. That was the end of the story. No revenge, no spectacular downfall, no movie ending. Just consequences. Natural consequences. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever expected. Not perfect. Some scars remain. They probably always will. But the bitterness is gone. The obsession is gone. The need for answers is gone. What remains is acceptance. If anyone reading this is currently living through something similar, I'll leave you with the lesson that took me the longest to learn. The betrayal changes your past. It does not have to control your future. For a long time, I thought losing my wife and my best friend in the same moment would destroy me. Instead, it taught me something unexpected. Sometimes the end of the life you plan is also the beginning of the life that's actually yours. And for the first time in years, that future feels honest. This is the end of the story. Don't forget to share with your friends, comment, like, and subscribe.